Abbe Lowell is joining us right now. He represents President Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Abbe, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for letting me explain.
All right, so your client, Jared Kushner, he sat down with the special counsel for a second time last month. The interview lasted, what, about 7 hours? What was the focus?
So the focus of Jared's cooperation has really been dictated by what the special counsel wants. Back in the fall, they were interested in understanding some of the issues about General Flynn, and he answered all their questions then. And in April, we basically followed their lead, and the topics were what were the appropriate topics. You know that they're being thorough in looking at the campaign, and by campaign, the issue that they're investigating is whether there was something called collusion, whatever that means to people. They're looking to see whether there was some undue influence put on by outside countries, particularly Russia. And they've been looking at some of the post-inauguration issues, primarily the firing of James Comey. And of course, Jared has had roles in the campaign. He was the point of contact for foreign officials for that and also in the transition. And he was around the circumstances that were ultimately led to the firing of Comey. So you can assume that they know their topics, and they would have exhausted all of them. So
I just want to be precise. He was questioned about what happened during the campaign, but also what has happened during the presidency, right?
Not as extensively, Wolf. I mean, the topics post-inauguration are very limited, if you think about it, and they should be.
Like
everybody understands that the Office of Special Counsel...
Justice, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
Obstruction of justice, the firing of Comey. I assume that was one of the subjects.
You should assume the following, that everybody has said that the Office of Special Counsel is looking at two things. They're looking to see whether there was collusion with Russia in the campaign and whether or not anybody in the campaign was involved and if that violates any law. And they're looking at this broad topic that they call, or the media calls, obstruction of justice. They would have asked questions of all their witnesses, including Jared Kushner, about those topics. But he has a unique role. He was there in the campaign, he was there in the transition, and he worked in the White House when events occurred after the inauguration that is of interest to the council. They asked him questions. He answered every single one. It was thorough. And I think what's interesting is that, you know, you all, I don't mean you all, CNN, I mean, the media gets ahead of itself so often, right? They've talked about stories about him being under investigation for his finances, for his role in his companies. Let me tell you, those were not the topics.
So what were the topics? What were the specific questions? And were you there during those 7 hours?
Well, of course, a lawyer would be in a room with an interview. I think all people that get interviewed should and do have lawyers, so that would be yes. As to the questions, no. I'll tell you the topics. They were the appropriate topics that Bob Mueller and his team are looking at. They are what happened in the campaign that might suggest that there were some outside influences, primarily this, what I call the allegations of Russia collusion, issues of contacts with people, particularly foreigners, during the transition, and the topics of post-inauguration, what is lumped into the category of obstruction. I can't really tell you question by question. It wouldn't be appropriate. What we're trying to do is clear the air. We knew people knew about this. Somebody leaked it. And I want to respect the Office of Special Counsel and allow them to do their work, as Mr. Kushner did. But I'm not going to tell you, do they ask, where were you sitting in Trump Tower when you saw so-and-so? That doesn't make sense.
Is Jared Kushner fully cooperating with the Special Counsel?
I don't know that anybody could be cooperating more. He has spoken to them when asked. He has provided them with tons of documents that reflect what he's provided Congress and what else they have asked for. He sat down in the fall when they wanted to ask questions about General Flynn. And he was very happy to spend almost an entire workday when they asked again. So I would say it's the definition of cooperation.
You expect that Jared Kushner will be asked for more interviews with the special counsel, or was this the last one?
I mean, I am assuming, given the thoroughness by which the counsel's office works and the degree of work that they've done, this should, for all intents and purposes, be done. Would they have a straight question because they go talk to another witness who says something that they want to have Mr. Kushner corroborate or opine about? It could happen. So no one should say, oh, there'll never be another inquiry of any kind. But after spending a total of over 9 hours with him from November and then in April, I can't imagine there's another question they could possibly ask that would be relevant, and he answered every single one.
Has Jared Kushner been told if he's a witness, a subject, a target of the investigation?
The answer to that is those are words that you guys in the media report, and they make no sense to people who are practicing lawyers because
these are legal terms, as you know.
They are not. They exist in the United States Attorney's Manual for primarily the purpose of telling people when they're supposed to be given their rights before they go into a grand jury or get a subpoena. I have done this for a bunch, and I'll tell you that today's witness is tomorrow's indicted person. So I don't ask that question. What I do ask is whether somebody is the focus of the investigation or whether somebody should be expecting more questions. Those are questions that I ask. But these are just the titles that are handy for the media to use. And so I didn't ask. But I would tell you that in my experience, the kinds of questions they asked, the kinds of statements he made, the kinds of information he has reflects that they understand that he's a witness to the events. But I don't use those terms. Well, that was the
question, if he's a witness, a subject, or a target. So
I simply don't use those terms.
Well,
I never have.
Let me try to pin you down. Has he specifically been told that he is not going to be charged?
That is like, why would anybody ask that question? Let's put it this way. The answer to your question, I think, is the special counsel nor any other prosecutor has indicated that they have any intention to believe that Mr. Kushner has done anything that would remotely merit being charged. So it's a checklist question for you for sure. Is he a target? Is he a subject? Is he a witness? The better answer is there's nothing he's done and nothing that I've seen that would indicate that anybody would have an interest in him other than as being a witness to events. And nobody has indicated they have any intention of saying to him, you've done something wrong that would merit any charges. That's just remotely not the case.
Let's talk about Jared Kushner's security clearance, which has now, we're told, been restored. Who made the decision to restore his security clearance? How did that happen?
The intelligence community and the FBI. It happened in the normal course. It happened the way it happens for thousands of people. It goes to, initially, the Bureau, who does a background investigation. It takes a lot of time. It then gets traced through various agencies. It gets to the White House. There's a special office that does security measures. They're all career people. There was nobody in the political process that had anything to do with it. There was nobody who pressured it. It was just done the normal, regular way. And in fact, the delay that people reported about was caused by the things we said, which was a backlog in a new administration. And remember, Mr. Kushner has extensive holdings that each and every one required somebody to look at to determine the nature of the finances. And so, of course, it took a long time. But it was done the normal process only by career people that do it every day and have done it for years that way. And is it secret, top secret, SCI? What level of security clearance? And so you will know from all the work you've done that what somebody's clearance is itself a piece of classified information. And I'm very hopeful to hang on to mine, so I can't answer that question. Well, let me ask you this. Will he have access to the presidential daily brief? I will tell you this, that he has been restored in a permanent clearance to get all the material that he needs and all the material he got in the past in order to do the job the president has asked him to do. And so that may answer the question the way you asked it. Well, if he's going to be an advisor on the Middle East and China and other sensitive issues like Mexico, I assume he will have access to that presidential daily brief. But you don't want to answer that question. But we'll leave it on that front. Abbe Lowell, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain. We'll continue this conversation down the road. Appreciate it very much. Let's bring back our legal and law enforcement analysts to get some reaction to what we just heard. Michael Zeldin, once again, you used to work for Robert Mueller. What stood out to you from what we just heard from Abbe Lowell, who's obviously a very experienced lawyer here in town?
Well, there are a couple of things. First and foremost, it struck me, as we talked about before the segment with Lowell, that Mueller is moving in a very methodic way through all of the topics that are a part of his mandate. And Abbe ticked them all off, and that's good to know that Mueller is checking his boxes that way. It was interesting to me as well that Abbe indicated that there was no questions about personal finances. All of the media stories about 666 Fifth Avenue and the like, the areas that we think of as, you know, the red line that the president drew for personal financial issues was not, according to Abbe, part of the conversation. And then I think finally, with respect to Abbe's unwillingness to decide whether he was, what level he was a target subject or witness. I think it's pretty clear that Abbe is confident that his client is a witness at this point and is not likely to be charged by Robert Mueller. That's how I think they walk away from this interview, feeling they comprehensively answered their questions, they didn't address personal finances, and he's most likely at this point a witness.
Yeah, that's the way I heard it as well. Joey Jackson is with us. What stood out to you, Joey?
Well, just as a point of disagreement, I know he's a very well-respected and experienced defense attorney. However, I've been practicing for 20 years, and I beg to differ with regard to the media making up terms, witness and target and subject. These are terms that I discuss regularly with a United States attorney or a district attorney, for that matter, at the state level. We do, in fact, in the normal parlance, refer. What would you like my client as? What is he? Is he a witness to events? Is it someone, the subject that you're looking at, or is he the specific or she the specific inquiry of your investigation? So that's significant, number one. Number two, as it relates to anyone breathing easily, I would not say that. Let us remind ourselves of what Mueller has done. He is not only investigating and looking at the issue of collusion or the issue of obstruction, but we know it's a crime to lie to the FBI. And so I'm sure that, Mr. Kushner stated his piece and was asked questions and was forthcoming. In the event he was not, however, it would be of concern. If you look at Papadopoulos, if you look at Flynn, if you look at Vanderswan, if you look at the people who have pled guilty, they have pled guilty to lying. So to the extent that he was truthful and honest, then there's nothing to worry about. In the event that that is not the case, then I think that there's an issue. Finally, Wolf, I don't draw the connection between the security clearance offering and what, if anything, he said to the special counsel. This has been a special counsel that hasn't had leaks. This is a special counsel that has kept their information very close to their vest. And this is a special counsel, if I think, had concerns or objections, I'm not sure that they would be calling, raising objections about any security clearance. I think they will be quiet. They will wrap up their investigation. And if there are things that Mr. Kushner has to answer to, he will answer to. In the event he doesn't, then he's home free. But I'm one that does not draw any causal connection between the issuance of a security clearance and what, if anything, he said or did not say to the special counsel. Yeah,
fair point. Josh Campbell is still with us as well. Josh, you heard Abbe Lowell's explanation for why Jared Kushner's security clearance was restored, why it took so long to get that security clearance. Does that all make sense to you?
Yeah, well, if I'm with Joey on this, as far as not drawing that distinction between the two topics. So in on one end, we have the special counsel investigation looking into what Jared may or may not know. And then on the other hand, we have the intelligence community and the White House security office trying to determine his suitability for access to classified information. I don't know that we can say for sure that those two sides will be talking to each other. One thing that stood out to me with respect to the interview itself is, we get paid in this business to parse the words of lawyers. And one thing that was interesting, although, it appears as though, Mr. Kushner was cooperative, one thing that his attorney mentioned is that he answered every question. Well, when I was an FBI agent interviewing people, I sat across from people who also answered every one of my questions. That doesn't mean that they answered them accurately or fully. And I'm not suggesting that's the case here. I'm just saying we have to kind of parse this lawyer speak. The second thing being, I think that this should hopefully give some sense of comfort to the White House legal team as they're trying to determine, whether they continue in the showdown with Mueller as far as sitting down and writing questions or in person. Because as Mr. Kushner's own lawyer just said, the people doing the interview asked the appropriate topic. So I think that should give them some sense of, comfort that this isn't the witch hunt that they're trying to make it out to be.
Michael Zeldin, do you think Abbe Lowell, Kushner's lawyer, was trying to link the security clearance issue with Kushner's status in the Mueller investigation? He basically said he's simply a witness.
I think for sure that's what he is trying to say, and he may well be right. That his point being, if this client of mine was likely to be indicted or was a target of the investigation, then surely Mueller's team, notwithstanding the fact that it doesn't leak, would have notified the White House offices that offer clearance advice and ultimately the clearance that this was a problem. So I think that he's, maybe optimistically, but I think probably realistically linking the two together and feeling that his client is home free, except, of course, for the issues that Joey and Josh raised about if he was untruthful, that he always faces 1001 lying to a federal investigator. But until such time as that is proved, I think it's probably safe to conclude that walking out of that interview and receiving the security clearance, Abbe feels that his client answered those questions truthfully, he is a witness, and that he can go on with his life.